This is Inspirational Women, a weekly series shining the spotlight on female trailblazers making a true difference in our community. Once again, here is Kate Daniels.
Ellen Shapiro is joining us next, an author new to the area of young adult literature, which I believe also is a great read for adults. As International Holocaust Remembrance Day is observed on January 27th, I feel that Ellen's new book, The Secret Buttons, has a way of honoring those who died, along with those who managed to survive the horror. Ellen joins us to provide some background story, along with dreams of what this new book might accomplish. Ellen Shapiro, good morning. Thank you so greatly for being with us this morning.
Well, thank you for inviting me to be here. And that I understand I am broadcasting from my graphic design and writing studio in Irvington, New York, and you are in Seattle, Washington.
Yes, we're like coast to coast here. And we can see each other, but of course that's not recorded, so others won't see it. But they can certainly see a picture of you in the back of this book, and if they go online, because you were mentioning to me earlier on that you've been working on a website, so you do have a website for us to get to.
Yes, I do have a website with my books, of which The Secret Buttons is one and top of the list right now, and books about graphic design and other things that I'm passionate about, including cooking and playing percussion, and also my work as a graphic designer over the last more than 25 years. I put a lot of those projects on the website.
And thinking of the graphic design that you do, just really felt it tied in so much with your main character, with Ani. Ani, am I
yeah, that's
that
right?
Ani. And because she is, well, while it's not graphic design, well, sort of it is, because she was doing designing in it, but she's also sews and does knitting work. So those kinds of arts all are bundled up. Did you kind of have a feeling of yourself being Ani in a way?
Ooh, that is a great question. I talked to Annie after a while, and I asked her, what would you do in this situation? What would you say? What are you thinking? What's your next step? Having a career as a magazine writer about graphic design and writing some short stories, but moving into writing a novel, I had to create characters. And Annie is based a little bit on one sentence my mother told me when I was about 10 years old, and what she was doing during the blackouts and the Blitz in London. She said, I crocheted around diamonds that I turned into buttons that I sewed to sweaters that refugees wore on the boats to America. And she told me it was a secret and not to tell anybody about it. But maybe 15 years after she died, I did mention it to a few people, and they said, that's amazing, because they knew a lot of them knew my mom was a knitter. She had a needlework shop. No matter where she was, she always had 10 knitting projects going at once. So that was definitely believable. But crocheting around diamonds, is this a big smuggling operation? How many people were involved? Who were they? What happened to them? Mm-hmm. Did you get any diamonds? I didn't have those answers because I never asked her those questions.
Well,
and even if I did, she might have changed the subject. So I had to work backwards and forwards and create characters.
And it feels very believable. It totally makes sense. But did you find something similar then in your research that to write the book, that you found that this would happen, that there would be papers perhaps sewn into the linings of coats and such?
I had heard that actually diamonds were sewn into the hems of coats. Because back in the day, I think they put weights. Even if you buy a very expensive coat now, it might have weights in the hem to keep the coat hanging properly, and that they might have put some jewelry in. So I'd heard that. but nothing about crocheting around diamonds. So I did do research, and I have actually two of my mother's old sewing books from the 1940s, and there are such things as wooden button molds that people who are making what I'm calling the Tyrolean sweater in the book, which is, I should be wearing one right now for this interview, but it's embroidered with flowers all over and has the crocheted trim around the neckline and the edges. And if you wanted to do a really good job of sewing it, you would crochet around the wooden button molds with the same yarn you used for the embroidery. And then you'd have matching buttons.
Yes.
So knowing that, that's one thing that made it real. That was, something that young seamstresses and knitters learned how to do.
Right. And so, of course, it's so fitting that this is the title of the book, The Secret Buttons. It brings up, so many thoughts as to what could this be? But of course, in getting into the book, we discovered, just as you've described, doing the crocheting around the buttons and how then this was a way because, well, share with us, if you will, Ellen, the reason for doing the diamonds.
Sure.
Right? Yes.
Why didn't you if you had diamonds, why didn't you just wear them on your finger?
Right.
Well, they might get stolen. You wouldn't want to wear your diamond ring on a boat to America that was filled with immigrants from top to bottom. But you wouldn't even have a diamond by then if you were an immigrant from maybe not even Central or Eastern Europe, from Holland, from France, all the countries where, the Nazis occupied the country and confiscated everybody's valuables.
Right.
But if you were very prescient and perhaps could foretell the future a bit, and you were lucky enough to have a relative or maybe know a banker in the UK, that you could, before the borders were closed, before the mail was stopped and the war began and there was no communication of that kind between people in Allied and Axis countries, you could have sent your money, wired your money to the Bank of England or someone in England who could put it in the bank for safekeeping. And it just so happens in my story, the Uncle Benjamin, who is taking care of my young characters, Annie and Rosie, during the pre-war years and the war, happens to have been in the diamond and watch business. So he had done that for a bunch of people who wanted to immigrate to America. But there was a law. And this is what I learned from a cousin that my mother actually stayed with during that period, which was, it was a law in the UK during the Second World War that no valuables or currency could leave the country. It was all needed for the war effort. So once she told me that, now I have something real, that I can base this story on.
Yes.
That it wouldn't sound entirely far-fetched that people would need to do that.
Yes. And, that word far-fetched. We would think it was far-fetched that people were moved out of their homes, that someone would have to, basically protect their home to be able to stay there by giving away their precious paintings. All of that seems far-fetched, and yet it happened. Yes.
They are still today. I see this in the New York Times in the arts section, that a painting that was confiscated by the Nazis has surfaced in somebody's basement or attic, or maybe a small gallery somewhere had it, and it turns out to be a very valuable work of art.
Yes. Yes.
And so I do have a character in the book who has a ballroom, a parlor as big as a ballroom, where my character, having been banned from the park where she and her sister used to play and go on the merry-go-round and ice skate, now there's a big sign that says no Jews allowed or Jews forbidden. Mm-hmm. Because her dad is an engineer and he can design anything. She wants him to help her design an indoor playground.
Right.
He says, no, that's too dangerous. We can't do that. But she's heard her grandma's talking about this woman who has a parlor as big as a ballroom. So by herself, she walks to the woman's house and she meets her. And the woman thinks it's a good idea because she does have this big, beautiful room that has a lot of dark spots on the wall. And she and her family only get to live there because they give the Nazis one painting every month. Yeah. And some wealthy people did that. So they can stay one more month. That's their rent payment. Yeah. And so Annie designs the playground and builds it with the husband of this woman, but it doesn't work out well. But that's her first, attempt to trying to do something.
Yes.
Not to be a passive victim. And reading a number of children's books and teen books that take place during the Holocaust, I noticed that the main characters are not the Jewish characters. The main characters are what's called the righteous Gentiles, the ones who saved them, put their own lives on the line to save them, to help them hide, to help them get safe passage, say from Denmark to Norway, and so forth. So those are wonderful books, but I wanted to do a book in which the Jewish main character is the one who makes things happen.
Yes. And that is great because I think you mentioned in your notes that I've read that, it was great to have a book, to have Anne Frank's diary, but that's so different. This is where there's being able to take more control and help others and really have, well, can we say a happy ending? Well, just an ending where there's more hope and there's a future for these young persons.
Well, Anne Frank unfortunately was not. I think that her father tried to get them to England and was unsuccessful, tried to get the family to America and was unsuccessful. So unfortunately, they had to stay in Amsterdam. And after hiding, they were finally discovered.
Yes.
All of us are fortunate to have Anne Frank's words, which have been translated into many, many languages and become I think, a Broadway play, at least 2 films. So Anne Frank lives on. And everybody's story is important. Everybody's story is different.
Yes.
So my characters managed to, because of this luckily their papa had a cousin in England who was able to get them there as domestic servant visas to be maids, basically. And that's what happened to my mother. Although they used her as a stenographer, not as a maid after a while. And she knitted for them too. But at any rate, everybody's story is different. So the more stories we have, the more immigration stories that show what immigrants have been able to accomplish in this country and in other countries, and the beauty that they brought to our lives, their talents, their contributions. I'm looking forward to reading more of those stories, and I hope writing another 1 or 2 of my own.
And I hope so as well, because along with, having these stories, which really, they are gut-wrenching. I mean, what has to happen? You see the children having to dig in the backyard to make a bomb shelter. I mean, that's so gritty, and we can't really relate except for the fact that I think what is really of value right now is seeing what happened and making sure that we're taking a look at, are there any ways this is a parallel? Are there any kind of touch points that are relevant to what we're living in today?
Absolutely. I mean, I don't want to get into politics here, but, when I open the New York Times every day and read more and more about what's happening to immigrants in the United States, there are parallels.
There are. And the stories are so critical. So this is, I would say it's historical fiction. But it's a way it is historical, though, as we've just been talking about, and I think through this we're empowered because we're not being told, well, look at how this is the same. I think the empowerment is being able to read and making the decisions in our own place. This is where I see this kind of connection. This is where I see this parallel. This is where I identify with this person. So I think that's where it's so important, because it crosses so much area. It touches so many people, and we can find it in our own personal lives.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. I want to go back, if I may, to something you
Yes.
said before about graphic design in the book. I
Oh.
tried to emphasize a bit about the importance of posters. Posters being an important genre of graphic design all over the world. And actually, I'm not, I don't think I can say the Nazis were the first to have what we would now call integrated branding program, but the Holocaust Museum in Washington D.C. put together an exhibit, and I visited it, and I have the book, how they coordinated their communications with typefaces, with colors, with imagery, with the style of illustration, and very, very bold posters that promoted their way of thinking and their cause. Very, unfortunately, very effective posters. So I have Annie and Rosie running into those posters right away in the beginning of the book. A blonde girl who is set up as the ideal. Then a man comes into their school and shows a poster of the people that we don't want among our master race. People with big noses, people with dark curly hair, people with dark skin. Uh-oh. Annie has dark curly hair. Is her nose big? There's a little illustration by my illustrator, Katerina Baldi, of Annie looking in the mirror and looking at her nose, thinking, when people see my nose, are they going to call the police? Because that's what that guy from, the Nazi Party representative told the school children. If you see anybody who looks like this, call the police. Call the Orpo police. Wow. Okay. So, and then when they get to England, there are posters all over the place. Posters about the war effort, about signing up, about rationing their food. And England was really deep into preparations for war when they arrived. Something that didn't happen in Austria. I think it seemed to me, from all the research I did, that the people in Austria were pretty content with their lot. They were professionals, and they were in love with their city and its culture and its museums and its cafes and its food, music, Mozart, concerts in the park. They didn't want to leave. They were told by the Nazis, if you stay and just follow our directions, like give us the names and addresses of all the members of the synagogues, things will be much better. And what do you think they did with the names and addresses? Because people lived in large apartment buildings, so then they knew who lived in apartment 6B and who lived in apartment 6D, and knew whose door to break down. So yes, this was several years of research. And again, I wanted to find those posters. And then when the girls finally come to America, there are posters everywhere about it, because America hadn't entered the war yet. And there were war posters and patriotic posters when they went to the soda shop, and also letters and books, and postage stamps and envelopes. These were things that I tried to incorporate, even ration book covers and identity cards, to show readers these were real artifacts. Somebody designed them, and they are part of the culture and the history and the time there. And another thing, I wouldn't have had this if I hadn't gotten my mother's artifacts. She managed to come to this country with a lot of little pieces of paper and booklets. Her union booklet when she worked in New Jersey with the stamps, and her, high school and university, what would they call them, like sort of identity booklets with their picture and what course they were in and what year it was, and her report cards. And one of the things, because of that helped me so much. And I do want to encourage readers, don't throw that stuff away. If it belonged to your grandparents or your great-grandparents or your parents, it's so important. Put it in a scrapbook. Keep it. Show it to your children. Talk to your children about it. Talk to your grandchildren. My grandchildren are just getting old enough that I can share some of these things with them. And I'm looking forward to that.
Yes. Oh, what a gift. And that is something that is essentially lost today because everything is so digitized and digital that we don't have that kind of wealth of like this postage stamps, which my father used to collect, and I have a love for that too. So, but it's not a big deal. They don't send letters so much anymore. So, yes.
Okay, scan things.
Yes.
Scan things and put them in the cloud.
There you go.
Keep them in your photo,
Oh, well, keep them, yes, but we're not creating as much. But
we're not creating as much. But actually, maybe we're creating a lot more because we have these trails of emails.
Well, yes, that is so.
Maybe Jeffrey Epstein shouldn't have sent so many emails.
Right. So and that lives forever, as we certainly are learning more and more, right? So
right. I like to watch shows like Law and Order, where, boy, those detectives can find out really quickly where what is it? I don't think they call it the perp anymore, but the person of interest.
Yes.
Was exactly where they were. You can follow someone's trail through their phone and all the other records that live forever online. Anyway, we're getting pretty far away from children's books, but these things are important. I want children to read books, not just look at their phones all the time.
Yes. The art here, I think, is part of really what can draw us in, and not just children, but adults. Really, I've loved it as an adult. I love historical fiction. Somehow I have this real interest, and I think it's an important interest to have in the time of World War II, because so much of the world changed. And as I recently heard someone say, it was almost obliterated at that time. So we really do need to learn this. And through the stories, we'll pick up what it is that we need to do and learn.
So that was one reason it was important for me to do an illustrated book. And to find a really good illustrator, a European illustrator, who didn't draw little cartoony characters of preschoolers, which I think a lot of children's illustrators are gravitating towards that market, but someone who knew how to draw cityscapes and street scenes and people who seemed to be real, in their environment. And that each of the 16 chapters begins with a double-page illustration that I hope sets the scene for the reader. Like you mentioned, digging the hole for the Anderson shelter in the backyard. You look at all the things going on in that picture, and you could talk about that for a while. And it saved me writing a lot of words to have illustrations that tell a lot of the story. And it was fun. This was actually the most fun part of it for me, was like being the set decorator and the costume designer and the weather person and even the gardener, that I would send my illustrator pictures like, this is what I'd like them to be wearing, and here's what an Anderson shelter looked like, and here are the parts of it, and here's the instructions, and here's what a gas mask looked like in pre-World War II days, that everybody in the UK was issued gas masks. This is a siren suit, which was a one-piece jumpsuit that zipped up the front that people were supposed to put on when they heard the air raid sirens and go and run in there, get underground in their shelters. And what time of the year was it? And what time of day was it that I could say, you know what, she's in Italy and it's probably a little bit different, but here's what flowers would be in bloom. The flowers in England might bloom at a different time than they do in Italy. So my illustrator might not know what would be in bloom in that month in England. So who knows? Maybe they are the same, but I just wanted to say, can you put tulips in this one? Or what about roses in that one?
The complete effect is absolutely marvelous. The artwork is stunning, and it really is such a great compliment to the story. In addition to that, you have your own work that you do with a graphic design and with designing just in general. And as I looked at your website, I'm just in awe of all of the reading material that you have there that supports students, supports teachers, parents, and such. So let's mention your website, Ellen.
So my website is visuallanguage.net, but with one L. I thought that was cute, and I've stuck with it, but it's visuallanguage.net.
Well, that's the beauty of it. That's the designer in you bringing through that creativity, right?
Yeah, but then I have to spell it all the time. So web host is always asking me, would you like visual languages 2words.net? I think, no, not at this point. Let's just stick with it. I think people can handle that. So I'm Ellen at visuallanguage.net. And there are my books, of course, with the secret buttons, in a starring role. And then my flip books and other materials for teaching English, for English language learners, kids who need help learning letter sounds, blending, and reading word sentences and books, we hope.
It's so wonderful. It's so stunning. And I was really so excited to come across that because I think that's just a whole other area that will support so many people. And you have a dream, an idea for Secret Buttons to have its own little niche, perhaps on the website, or its own particular section to interact with readers, right?
Right. So I bought the domain, secretbuttons.com, and plan to create a website for readers. So whether they're children, teens, adults, can they share their own immigration stories, or their parents, or their grandparents, or even ones they've heard? And what about their own drawings and paintings? So this is something that we have to figure out, how to make it a place where people can upload, and yet we can vet these so that they're all really, in the same lane, in the same genre as the book. But I'd like to give kids, especially kids, the opportunity to share their own artwork.
Well, Ellen Shapiro, again, this has been such a delight to make this connection with you, to talk about something so terrible in our past, and yet to find what is good and how to really support each other, support life.
Thank you. I'm very honored to be in this position, to be able to share what's important to me with you, and I hope with your listeners, and then with readers around the country.
Thank you for being here this morning to meet these special guests with their important stories and the opportunities they offer us to make our life and the lives of others better. Please check the station's website for the podcast for more information about these guests, and please share the stories with your family and friends. I'm Kate Daniels. If you'd like to connect with me, simply send me an email, katedaniels@hubbardradio.com. Now we go out into the day and aim to make life better for someone, and then see that we've done that for ourselves.
Thank you for listening to Inspirational Women. Tune in every Sunday morning at this time to hear about those truly empowering the Northwest community, all for the greater good. Sunday Morning Magazine and Inspirational Women are a public service of Hubbard Radio Seattle.